Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 17 of the Rewatch podcast presented by the Terrible Video Gamers Club. I'm your host, Tyler Schatz, fellow volunteer to follow Jon Snow north of the Wall. Joining me this fine podcast recording session, the Howards have made the return. Steven.
The maker of chains.
Amanda.
Hello.
Nick.
How many Starks need to be beheaded before you learn that lesson?
And last but certainly not least, Gary.
I really want to see the Kingslayer Brothers TV show.
Yeah.
All right. So, this fine recording session, we have recently watched Season 4, Episode 3, and Episode 4 of Game of Thrones. Season 3 was titled Breaker of Chains. And let's take a look here. I don't have the IMDb pulled up here right now, but we'll just kind of jump right into talking about the episode here. Throwing it over to Steven here first for his introduction post discussion he wants to talk about.
So I guess there were obviously a bunch of things happened this episode. Two things that I guess didn't impact me as much on the first watch as they did on the second watch. One of them I actually completely forgot about, and I have no idea why this happened. But the first one is that intro conversation between Tommen and his grandfather, talking about what makes a good king was a blah, 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 and goes to it's a wise king, and starts talking. And you see Cersei on the side just like, and I think she says, "Is this really the place?" And he just ignores the crap out of her, keeps going. And then even goes so far as to comment on our boy,
Your boy Joffrey. Your boy
sorry,
Joffrey.
your
Steven's
boy
forgotten
Joffrey.
the name because he's
I
already
apologize.
last year's news.
He's dead. Why should I have to remember his name? But comments on him. Your brother was neither wise nor good, and you just see the dead look in Cersei's eyes, just like, why? And that is just I forgot about that scene, and I can't say that Tywin is wrong. Just wow. Maybe pick your places better. Maybe he's trying to show Cersei something. Maybe he's trying to prove something to Cersei. I don't really know if it's more show for her or what it is.
I feel like it's a lot of just already playing puppet master to Tommen. I don't think he's trying. I think he would do the same thing if Cersei wasn't there. Like, to him, she's not there. Like you said, like, she's just like shot puppy face where she's like looking over it like, are you seriously already trying to brain warp the next king? You know, this is my boy here. My first son is dead. And Tywin's just going right into it. Like you said, he talks about a wise and just king, but he says a wise and just king listens to his advisors. It means him. Like, he's just right there telling him, you know, what makes a good king is you do what I say, right? It's just, it's throwing it right there, right on top of, you know, just throwing the dirt on top of Joffrey's dead corpse as he lays right there in the sept. And yeah, Cersei's just like so distraught, and she can't even respond. She doesn't know what to say. Powerful scene.
I think it's absolutely Tywin basically starting to plant the seed now here that he is the one in control of how everything goes there. I don't think he's going to let Cersei really get her hooks into him like she did with Joffrey, and then we all saw Joffrey turned out into shorthand, your boy Joffrey. So it's basically Tywin laying the groundwork early of, okay, we are going to do this right with you as a young king here to try and get you ready to basically take over the realm here, and hopefully not be a sadistic monster like your older brother was.
Yeah, I guess we're all kind of on the same page that he's definitely planting a seed. Also, I think he wants to ensure that he's not pushed aside, that his counsel is like, you know, in a very like, yeah, this is planting the seed of like, I'm here to make you a great king. Instead of saying I'm here to control, I'm here to make you a good king. And that's why I'm gonna, you know, be the puppet masters to make you a good king, not for my own self-interest.
But you guys don't think that he's trying to impact Cersei at all. You don't think any of that is for Cersei's benefit.
He doesn't give a shit about Cersei. Old news.
I think he's also like using the emotional thing on Tommen, who's like, this is his brother lying in front of him, and he's like, look what happens if you don't listen to me, if you're not wise. Like, the two weren't exactly close, but at the same time, that shock factor was gonna do a lot more for that lesson to sink in.
There's a lot of reference in this episode about how naive Tommen is. Like, we'll get to it too, but like even in the counterpoint to this scene is the one where Marjorie interacts with him too. And it's just like, oh, you sweet boy, you know, our little secret. And it's just all of this stuff.
I guess, and so building off of that, my second point, and this is something that I completely forgot about, and I don't know how I forgot about this, because we have been building up to this point where I don't think any of us really look at Jaime as a bad guy per se anymore. He's come a long way, character development, come a long way as a person, and I'll be honest, 100%, and this goes to say what I thought of it, but he rapes Cersei right next to her dead son. And I mean, you could say all you want about, oh, it was their loving couple, blah, blah, blah. That's still definitely rape. And right next to your dead boy's corpse. I was shocked, absolutely shocked that I did not remember this. It blew me away.
Okay. Disclaimer, not defendable actions.
Oh no.
But I also think that Jaime has had a bad couple weeks since he got back. That he got turned down by his great love, and so obviously he doesn't know how to process his emotions. Anyway, Nick is giving me the like digging a hole and go to hell, you're going to hell motions. So who's ever next?
It doesn't matter how bad a day you've had. That's not what's allowable. I think that what Gary's trying to say is, yes, we see where it's coming from, but no, Giant X, not cool. I agree with Steven that scene is very powerful because it shows that, like you were talking about, Steven, how even a character that we think has sort of flip-flopped and is sort of on the other side of the spectrum now, we're like, you know, he's got some really redeemable points to him too. We still have this darker side of a lot of these human characters that's like, holy cow, you know, like, okay, so we've reached their breaking point. There have been several scenes of Jaime and Cersei up to this point where clearly something's not the way it was before. And for some people, that might be how they like it. But for Jaime, he's not okay with where they are now. And if he's not going to get it agreeably, clearly he's going to do what he can. Yeah, in that scene, that's rape. She's saying, I don't want this, not like this. Like, that's a no.
And then I guess, and my other big thing that I don't know you guys, I forgot this scene existed. We all remember there was another scene, another violent scene coming up later on that garnered a lot of controversy. And I don't think this one garnered any controversy, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong on that. But is it because we don't like Cersei that is why we're just willing to let this kind of pass? It's the other person that this ends up happening to is more of a likable character, and it was a big deal. And I just, Tyler, what do you think?
So to kind of join Gary somewhat in digging my own hole about this part here, my initial watchings of this scene were taken completely different of like, and this is completely the wrong way I took it. There was like, I didn't fully comprehend what was going on there other than Jaime was forcing himself upon her, but they were still kind of going at it, even though she kind of said no. Like, fully honest, my brain did not put that together at all until I had spent some time reading comments on there. It was like, reading comments on like Reddit and stuff like that. Like, oh, okay, it finally all clicked in my head here and stuff like that. And I definitely would probably say though too, you touched on a good point there, Stephen, of like probably us as the viewers here, we definitely react to it slightly different because it is Cersei. We, at this point in time, we don't like Cersei. She has proven herself to be a bad person, but also too, Nick said it here. This is still a no. This is still like, this is something that should not happen here.
It's not acceptable.
Yes.
Going to Tyler said, is that if you're not paying attention, you might assume that this is just, it's still a passionate lovemaking, but they're having a dialogue of their sadnesses. But yes, if you pay more attention, it is not consensual. It is not okay. He is forcing himself upon her. And it's in a real weird spot and a weird setting into a crypt. But yes, anyway, Amanda.
Totally agree. Not great. Interesting thing to point out though, like that we've started to like Jaime at this point. And so I wonder if that's another reason that we don't like Cersei, but we do like Jaime. So it's easy for people to just play it down. But at the same time, it's interesting that because we like Jaime, we're willing to wipe out other things that we've seen and heard from him. But I mean, the very first episode of the show, he pushes a child out the window. So we keep forgetting about that darker side of it, even though that's also more historically accurate. Like there's people out there who can do horrible things and come home and be completely loving family members.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny that also, and I don't know when their next conversation is. There doesn't seem to be any fucking consequences. Like they seem to be like able to have another scene either in this episode or the next episode as if nothing happened. Like, and I think this is 100% not an acceptable way to interact romantically. But also for the showrunners, they did not add any consequences to this scene.
That's a very good point.
The interpersonal relationships didn't seem to change. Like, Cersei accepted that after the fact, which is not good. But not good on the showrunners for not giving Jaime any consequences. And the next time I think you see Jaime, he's being knightly and being the nice guy. So, definitely no consequences for him.
Oh, that speaks to what I think Amanda was talking about too. The next time we see him, like he's not like giving her a weird eye, like I'm sorry. Like he's just totally cool, or doesn't point out that was wrong of me. Yeah, very interesting. I have another point too. I was going to talk about. In that scene, not to belabor the awkwardness of this scene already that we're dissecting, but she is at first kind of receptive to it, and if I remember right, she like stops it and pulls away. So like she was in the moment going to be romantic with him, even given the scene and the context of where they are and what just transpired. But then she stops and she's like, no, this isn't right. And so I would never say like, well, she started it and so it's okay. That's not where I'm going. But like in that scene, she is almost reciprocating at first, but then has the wherewithal in the scene to stop and shut it down. And he doesn't. And so I was going to try and talk about how the interesting play between them two is that he gives into that darker side, whereas she still seems aloof or control of herself enough to realize that this is not what she wants to do. It's what she feels her urge is leading her towards, but her mentally, she doesn't want to do that. It's just interesting how one is more physical and instinctual and one is more mentally aware.
They're handling their grief.
Yeah, right. Everybody grieves different.
Yes. No, not everyone grieves appropriately. Anyway, any other comments on this scene, or can we get the hell out of the hole that Gary dug himself?
Well, I will say those were the two. No, those were the two that I was looking at.
Okay. Amanda, we'll throw it to you.
Well, if we go check on Tyrion, he's, been arrested. But there's a rather touching scene between him and Podrick, I thought. Pod comes to him and they're talking, but Pod kind of like gives him a little information, but he also mentions that like he fesses up that basically someone came to ask him to testify against Tyrion. And I feel like Tyrion at the first is like, and what'd you say to him? Are you gonna do it? But Pod didn't tell them anything, and
Pod for king.
Steven's favorite character. But Pod refused to tell him, and Tyrion is like, you have to accept it. You cannot do this. I will not walk to my grave seeing you there first. You have to do this. That's an order. Get out of here. This is fair. And then he says at the very end, which just makes you tear up a little bit, Pod, there's never lived a more loyal squire. Tugging
My
at
boy.
the heartstrings.
I feel
Go
like
ahead.
in that scene, Tyrion completely accepted that, like, he believed that Pod could have and should have, like, threw him under the bus. But that Pod, being a slightly honest person, would have at least told him, like, just so you know, I'm the one who threw you under the bus. I think Tyrion would have completely accepted it because Pod was at least man enough to go to him and, admit that someone would talk to him and, well, what did you say? Well, I hadn't decided yet. So he phrased the question originally, and maybe it's just how the dialogue is written, that originally you thought that maybe Tyrion was going to tell Pod to say yes or no. And he said, oh, I already said no. But anyway. I
had some comments on this scene as well. It's such a solid scene. I have to admit, my recollection about when I first watched this show, I wasn't really focused on Pod. Like, he was just sort of a supplemental character in the auxiliary. But Steven keeps talking about Pod for king. Like, rewatching these scenes, kind of focusing on these supplemental characters, he totally saves characters and brings so much more richness to this the undertone of these characters. Tyrion is sullen and he's stuck in his cell, and Pod gives so much exposition in that scene too, and it is totally heartwarming. You see how much respect he has for him in that final line about his loyalty and how kind he is, and how maybe naive because he doesn't realize like his life may be in danger, but how solid he is as a character as well. I really in that scene had some comments too about like I mentioned, the exposition in that scene too, because he's like, who do you want to call for your witnesses? And Tyrion starts talking about different people, and Pod's like explaining things that Tyrion didn't even know about. So yeah, well, we can move to that next if you want, but that scene is so strong, and Pod is such a strong character, just being innocent. He really shines through.
Do you have anything else, Amanda?
Well, that was my favorite part. I just wanted to make sure we talked about.
Okay. Gary, what do you got for us?
I guess I had a scene early on where Lord Baelish was talking to Sansa on the boat, and he says to her, what did I once tell you about the capital? And her response is, we're all liars here. And I guess I listened to that and I said, does Sansa consider herself a dweller of the capital? Like someone who is a liar now? Or was she just repeating what Baelish originally said, that like everyone in the capital is a liar? Or was she grouping herself into that group? Nick?
I can give a reply. I think that a lot of what we see in Sansa is reactionary. Like, everything terrible you could possibly imagine happens to her, and we always see her with this reactionary face of like, oh, I never saw that coming, or how could this happen? And she's sad and she's sullen and she's distraught. And I feel like there's a really good chance that she's learning things. Like, as her character develops, I feel like, this is happening to me and it's terrible. I'm going to store that away. This is happening and it's terrible. I'm going to store that away. Because for all these terrible things that are happening to her, she doesn't like the same thing doesn't happen to her twice. Kind of get what I'm saying? Where, I have so much faith in my family. All right, my family's gone. I have so much faith in my husband. Well, he's a terrible person. And then Joffrey gets taken care of, and we find out I have a little bit more caution around my next husband with Tyrion, and he reserves himself. He doesn't seem to be, a jerk who thrusts himself on her. So she's a little bit more at ease with herself. Like, she does learn a little bit in each interaction, and I'm really curious to see if she's going to apply that as her character develops down the road. So I think I would say, Gary, she doesn't consider herself a liar, but it's something that she needs to remember, because it clearly is something that is a lesson to learn for her.
Yeah, to answer Gary's original question there, I should say, Sansa was just repeating back what she remembered Littlefinger saying, and on point too there with Nick's thing is Sansa's just kind of naive still in all of this. Like, it's not fully explained in the way the show is, but she's still considered a young girl in this world here. She's not, she's of age in the world to be married, but she's still not of age to kind of be, I want to say being a woman in this world, but that's not quite the way to say it. She's not at the maturity level. Maybe that's what I'm trying to get across, of basically being up there as the mature part of this world. So she's just reacting to a lot of this. Like Nick said, she's just repeating what others have told her. She's not really quite yet thinking for herself fully, probably. Steven?
Yeah, I actually disagree with you guys. I think that, and I disagree and agree. It's a little bit of both. I'm going to say that I think she does believe it. When she says it, she believes it. And she believes it because she's been told it. And I think that you're entirely right. She's incredibly naive, and she believes whatever she's been told, because it just kind of breaks her down. And I honestly believe that what she says, she believes. It's not she might not actually be it. She might be lying to herself, but she does believe it. I also do like what Nick said about how she learns a little bit. And it reminds me of like Abraham Lincoln quote. This is like a iron slate. I know what's going to happen here. I'm like an iron slate. It takes forever to engrave something upon my mind, but when it's there, it's gonna stay there forever. And that's kind of paraphrasing. It's not the exact way of putting it, but that's what Sansa does. It takes a long time to impress something upon her, but when it's impressed upon her, she learns from it, and it stays with her. It stays with her forever. And so I don't believe she has the emotional maturity, like what Tyler said, but I honestly believe she believes she's a liar. Whether she is or isn't, I believe she believes it.
I think there's a distinction there. I think when she says it, she believes everyone else is a liar. I don't know if I'm on page with what Steven said, that she thinks she's a liar. I might not just understand it enough, but there's a distinction there, I think.
I guess I'll throw more gasoline on the fire. Do you feel that the actress who is Sansa Stark is a good actress, and maybe these lines and this information is not well communicated through her acting, similar to a Jean Grey lady in the new X-Men movies? Poor acting, not good writing either. But
I have
Nick
here.
Nick, what do you got?
I think she is, in my opinion. My humble opinion. I don't claim to be a master knower of all these things, but I would say yes, she's a good actor, because anyone can act mean and seem like a jerk. It's very difficult to act innocent without seeming like a fool. Like, if somebody's like, "Oh, I don't know what's going on," it comes off very fake. I think she genuinely portrays innocent well, and I'm free to take criticism or counterpoints to that thought, but. I genuinely feel for the character of Sansa Stark. How she is portraying her is someone, like I said, very reactionary. Things happen to her, and it's like, oh, that sucks. I'm sad. But it's done in such a genuine way that it's like, how could you not have foreseen that the possibility of your brother losing this war was something that would be visceral and violent given the very nature of the people you're surrounded by, who are family members to this opposition. It's not just losing family members; it's losing them in such a way that would wreck anybody else, and yet you still see her persevere. To me, that's innocence. That's naive. That's fool's hope.
Nick, you've explained the character much better than it was acted, in my opinion.
Agree to disagree.
So, I agree with Nick. I think that she is a good actress, at least in this HBO series, and I think not even a little bit of that is attributable as well to the. I don't know who actually does this at HBO, but the ability to get an actor's talent out on the screen at HBO is phenomenal. There are actors and actresses who play on HBO series, on HBO movies, who are phenomenal and go on to flop in other roles. And there's somebody about that talent screening, the ability to get that talent out on film that is at HBO. And to that point, I think that the person who plays Sansa, whose name I forget right now, does a very good job at portraying who she's supposed to portray. And that's a broken young girl who has nothing to, believes that she is just at the whim of all the fates of Earth. She has no, I guess, strength of character because that's who she is at that point in time. And I think that the person who plays Sansa is doing that very well.
I think it's Sophie Turner. Is that right?
Correct.
I wanted to give credit where it was. I couldn't think of it in my.
I just think that I just believe that. I just don't believe that all the depth of the character is really shown, or maybe it's just poorly written. But it just seems like it's very blah when she's on the screen. Like, I don't know, Nick.
You touched on a point there. Sophie Turner, yes, to give credit where credit is due. A phenomenal actor in this series. I don't know her from any other things, to my discredit. The thing you just mentioned, Gary, is she doesn't have much depth, or it doesn't seem like there's a lot there. I think that beguiles the point I was originally going to say. Like, she's just sort of absorbing everything and tucking it away for something else. Like, she seems very flat, innocent on the surface. I think there's more there. Like, she's just like, oh, well, then, I can't believe that happened. But it's a hard learned lesson. And sometimes people take hard learned lessons to heart, and you don't see the fruits of those vicious sensitivities until the opportune moment.
Nick, we can agree to disagree. And if I find a good example in later seasons, if she survives, I will rub it in your face. Because I think that all this bullshit about growing and learning and whatever, it's not at all shown. It's just the same whiny fucking character from.
Wait, Gary, are you telling me that some of the characters on Game of Thrones don't have a necessarily linear path to where they are going towards the end of this series and somehow go for loops?
I would never say that.
I believe, yeah, you never.
He's a boring character to Gary compared to his hero.
Right? Your boy Joffrey.
That's why Gary. Oh, that's why you're so salty. Your hero died. I get it now.
Oh, Gary,
I'm
we're here for you in your time of sorrow.
I was really quick, and then I'll shut up because I've talked way too much already in this podcast. My quote has been met. The counterpoint to this character, we're discussing Sansa right now. Not a direct correlation, but Daenerys. Now, if you want to talk about someone who seems very flat on the level, Daenerys does not portray innocent well, in my mind. Yeah, I'm kind of at the whims of Khal Drogo and my brother Viserys, and now I'm sort of stepping into my own as who I am. But even in their interactions, we're in season 4 now, Daenerys doesn't have a lot of depth to her character, right? I mean, what are her goals? I want to take over the Iron Throne, and we're 4 seasons in. I want to rule, or I want to be a good queen. And she's just kind of nomadically walking around Slaver's Bay. I don't really think that there's a lot of depth to her yet. I think that, each of these characters do not just to disagree with Gary, but kind of to disagree with Gary. I think that they do have an arc of growth, but like if you want to talk about somebody who seems very like stale almost to me in these seasons, again, rewatching it, I have the perspective of foresight, knowing what's going on. But in these seasons, I'm rewatching with a fresh pair of eyes again. I think that there's a difference there that I didn't see at first. And Daenerys does have hopes, aspirations, but not clear goals. And so I would say if you're looking for a character who's flatter, I would say Daenerys more so than Sansa.
I'm going to agree with Nick, and I know everyone knows I do not like Daenerys, but I think one of the things the character of Daenerys is she is very one-dimensional. I don't believe she really has like Nick said, a little bit of depth to her. She has a one thing that she has always been looking to do, and I get that you have to have that one end goal, and that's to be retake your lands and stuff like that. She doesn't learn. She doesn't grow. She doesn't evolve. She gets dragons, and that's it. And maybe that's saying something to the extent of if you have an overwhelming power, or you put all your quote unquote eggs in one basket, you grow along those lines, and you become fairly, stale. You become fairly level on that. You just go all in on that, and that's what you become. And that's kind of seems what it becomes for her is that. She doesn't have nuance. She doesn't have subtlety. And I will be bringing this up, by the way, in the next episode. There is no nuance. There is no subtlety. There is cruelty. She grows in cruelty. And that's not I don't believe that is a defining character trait that makes you deep, that makes you different.
I said I wouldn't talk, and I'm talking again. You learn far more from failures than you ever do from success. All we've seen from Daenerys is that she's won all these wars and battles and keeps getting stronger. So there it is.
Well, isn't that though then a credit to where Daenerys and Sansa are on two completely different paths here? Then Sansa is slowly growing and learning as she learns, as we learn here. She learns from her time spent with Cersei. She's learned from her time spent with Tyrion. She's learning from her time spent with Littlefinger. So her path of growth is kind of more gradual. Right now, yes, Daenerys, other than the initial failure she had with her marriage to Khal Drogo ended, thus the Dothraki horde that she was with split up and went all sorts of separate directions away from her. But then she came right back and rebuilt her armies and everything like that. So she's been on more of a straight up trend. Obviously, yeah, I will agree, she hasn't really had any failures happen to her yet, but that's also just been part of her journey of as the ruler and everything like that. She's not been hit with too much adversity because she has dragons. She's acquired her army. She has people around her that are somewhat counseling her and keeping her whims somewhat in check. I don't think Daenerys really hits failure at this point in time yet. So she's not quite there on the same level as Sansa, though, because Sansa is constantly keep running into failure after failure, or not even necessarily failure for Sansa, is just stopping point, stopping point, stopping point.
Sansa has no room for success, whereas Daenerys is, I think, going on and not trying to move too far forward. Is I feel like you see the evolution of Daenerys going from being a victim to being kind of gaining her own self-esteem and then gaining followers because she's an inspiration. And what inspires people changes every group she acquires. First group, it was just, oh, you have dragons. And the second group was like, that she didn't want to see all the Unsullied be slaves, and was very torn up about the very effed up story of how they get to be Unsullied. And she's like, I don't have, this is baloney. And then she breaks chains. So what I think you see on Daenerys is a flow of inspiring people up into a point where she can't live up to those expectations. Sort of that weird management rule that any company will promote someone until they're incompetent in the role that they give them. I think that's where Daenerys is going. I just think that the Sansa storyline could have been. It just seemed like she's always the victim, and much like Jaime, I think they're trying to put her through some redemption arc. And in the story of Game of Thrones, as soon as someone gets a redemption arc, they're dead the next episode. So the two people at this point that you should be the most worried about kicking the bucket are Jaime and Sansa, because they're going through a redemption arc. And maybe Tyrion. Who knows?
Always be concerned about Tyrion.
So, like, somebody's going to kick the bucket this season. But it's like, if Game of Thrones taught you anything, it's that it's probably going to be somebody whose plans are coming together. So, anyway, can we kill that conversation? Like, we'll agree to disagree that Daenerys is a much more interesting character up to this point.
You're not getting the last word. Daenerys is not a more interesting character. Yes, let's move on. Tyler, let's move on to the next point now.
I have one other item for this episode, unless somebody wants to.
Go for it.
The last sort of scene in the episode is the catapulting of the barrels, and I guess I remember kind of transition between the initial watching and the rewatching, and I guess did anyone else on their either watch think that they were catapulting something other than what you know later is chains? Like it was like fire barrels or like something, like some sort of very devastating weapon. Also, on the rewatch a couple episodes earlier, you saw that she tells whoever takes the mile markers down to remove their chains first, which I think is supposed to be an allusion to this point. Tyler?
So, like, watching that scene this time, it kind of had the thought of, like, what the hell is she doing just launching this stuff into the city with kind of reckless abandon, it felt like, because it hits all sorts of random places where people, like, could have been hit by the debris that came off the barrels that shattered and stuff. So here she is trying to inspire these people and trying to send a message to them, and here she is launching stuff at them.
Barrel is not going to inspire confidence.
Yeah, let's just launch a barrel full of something out into the city and be like, here you go. But
it's a weird Trojan horse analogy. Like, you throw something. It's an inverse Trojan horse. I might be fucking up my. But you're throwing munition into a city that I assume is going to be damaged, but it's just like it's chains. Like it's supposed to be inspirational. It's like expecting to fight Genghis Khan and instead you get Martin Luther King. Anyway. Bad analogies. I'll just say that I'm digging myself a whole different hole now. Anyway, I just was curious. Like, I remember on the initial watch, you just hear her say, like, forward. And then she's like, fire. It's like, oh, shit. Also, like, the pissing match. That was real good. And, yeah, that whole... I feel like that's also... I don't know. That was a good scene. The weird chain ending, like not the best part of that story arc, but the battle, Daenerys doesn't get a lot of good battle fights on her end. Like I think we were mentioning in previous episodes that like they very much downscale the war, the action scenes were in Daenerys's part of the country, and so this was at least a little bit of action. Anyway, Nick?
I think the barrels kind of speak to maybe the cruelty or the reckless abandon that Tyler and Steven were talking about. Where, yeah, I mean, what's the point behind them? I think, like you said, it maybe is an allusion to I'm returning these chains, or, you know, the dead are coming back to roost, back to you, and like their blood is on your hands or something of that nature. It's kind of what I took away from that scene. I did like that battle too. I didn't remember that there was a battle there, or that like they sent out a champion, and so I didn't recall how it would end or what would happen. But as I was watching it, I thought to myself, just go for the horse. Well, it's like this guy is charging, and they have several side running shots of the horse running down the ranks. And yeah, you're gonna get ran over if you try and attack the rider. Do something to stop the horse. And so it was a clear. It shows the wisdom of Daenerys's generals, like you talked about. Um, Barristan Selmy is who he is, and Jorah's been around forever, and Grey Worm and Missandei, and all these great people, like you said, who are maybe the inspiration that are really holding Daenerys up. But yeah, we haven't seen much from Dario Naharis other than he killed his compatriots in the previous episode with the Second Sons. So to see him hold his own with such a great audience to watch it, it really speaks to the wisdom that he brings to the table as well in that battle.
Say, like, I think that, they're trying to build up Dario as a more interesting character. Also, I'm going to have to defer to somebody else. I'm pretty sure in most historical battles, if you were to ride a horse out, you'd have some sort of armor on the horse. Like, you'd have some sort of... I feel like you'd defend the horse a little better. Especially if you're a champion. If you're a champion, you'd probably have, like, lots of silks on your horse. It'd be very well groomed. Like, I wouldn't think it'd be some horse that can easily be stabbed. Like, I feel like if you loved your horse, you'd take care of it a little better. Anyway,
Depends on where and when.
Right.
And how much money you have. I bet plate armor for horses is crazy. I did actually really like that part with Dario doing that because it's almost ironically against movies that will tend to make things that like so much more, they'll build it up and everything, when really that is not how you would go about it in real life. That is not an efficient manner. Whereas he was like, nope, I'm not going to do this. I don't need a horse. That's dumb. And he just takes it down without any fuss about it. Go ahead, Stephen.
So I was actually, and maybe a little bit of a tangent or riff on this. When you're talking about how smart Dany's generals are and how competent her advisors are, that actually struck me as something I haven't really considered too much before, and how she does have a lot of really competent people surrounding her. And going back to the conversation we just had, maybe that's also what makes her a little bit more one-dimensional, in that you have a lot of, we would say, executive-heavy groups in the Westeros, with the king having to be absolutely dynamic to control that. With Dany, she doesn't need to be dynamic. She doesn't need to extend her knowledge to a whole bunch of different reigns, because she has so many fantastic advisors to do that for her. There's no reason for her to grow in those ways. And I wonder if that maybe stunts her growth or stunts her character development, or if that's just a good leader being able to choose good advisors, which that is a fantastic mark of a good leader, is the ability to choose good advisors. So, sorry, that was just a little bit of a riff on what you were talking about.
Oh, excellent point. That's a really good perspective. Just that she maybe doesn't grow because she doesn't have to, because she's got all these great people around her. I like the comparison too with Westeros, where everybody hates everybody else trying to get the position of power. Where for Daenerys's camp, everybody looks up to her. Like everybody, I mean, for this part in the story where we're at, it seems like she doesn't have a competitor within her own ranks, whereas everybody else wants to backstab everybody else over in Westeros. And then the other comment that I originally raised my hand with too was on Amanda's comment about the opposite of what you expect happens, but it makes so much more sense. And it totally struck me that this scene is just like Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Indiana shoots the swordsman. It's like, that's the perfect thing to do. It's like, boom, conversation done. You don't need something that's this big, the people's champion convoluted battle. It's boom, done. And in the smoke, he beheads him.
Also going to say on the as the sort of the setup of the scene has a lot of, I'm sure, to a lot more relevance to historical things, but also the movie Troy with Brad Pitt, like where you see all the people up top, and then they send out the king's son, and the king's son gets shit rocked by Brad Pitt, and then
Actor.
Hector. People don't need names in movies. But anyway, that's just all I had. And that is my last bullet point for this episode. So we can go to the next person.
Holy cow. I think, Nick, did you have anything?
We've touched on a lot of them, so I won't belabor it too much. But I commented about Tyrion and Pod talking in that one scene in the jail cells, and how Pod gives exposition to the scene that we know as audience members, but Tyrion doesn't know. He mentions Bronn, and everyone's like, because obviously he's his best friend, and everyone's like, no, you can't see Bronn. He says, my wife will vouch for me. And he doesn't even bat an eye about it. He's like, Sansa will be there. And for him to hear that she's already gone, no one has seen her, you can see the concern in his face, probably for a lot of the reasons we've already been talking about, that she's seen as someone who's maybe one-dimensional or maybe overly naive. Or is she already in trouble? Has she been kidnapped, or is she just gone? And both of them obviously point out that makes her look guilty. I had a question for you all about that interaction with Tyrion hearing that. Do you think Tyrion suspects Sansa? He says no, but she's gone. Like, what do you think he's worried about for her? Her safety? Or that she's found, and worse, maybe she was complicit?
I think multiple people in this episode and the next episode point out that she has the most reason to hate Joffrey of anyone, but they still don't think she did it. I guess my quick point, and I'll let the other people answer Nick's question, was that he not only did he not know that Sansa was missing, but he thought that Sansa would come to his aid, like somebody who he knows Sansa doesn't like him. And it's well known that, like, she was given away for very much lands and titles, but he still thinks of her as the one person who'd go to bat for him, that, like, he would not do this. Like, so anyway, that's all I had. Amanda?
Tyrion does say, like, no, Sansa, she wouldn't do this. But yeah, I do think that there has to be that little bit of doubt somewhere in there. Like, you might know somebody and be like, no, they wouldn't do this. But at the same part, there's going to be a corner of your mind that's going, well, they could have done it. No, they didn't do it. There's no way. But there's still this one little fact that doesn't make sense. Where are they? So I feel like there's a teensy part of him that has to wonder, and it keeps getting shot down by the other part that goes, there's no way, we know her. But again, where is she? And yet, Gary's got a good point too, that, like, it is interesting that, like, on knowing her, this short time, knowing everything it does, he's still like, she would definitely help me. And so that's actually interesting to note, especially for the future.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then the other point I was going to mention too was also in the cells. Is Tyrion visited by his brother in this one, or is that the next episode? Fair enough. I'll talk about that when we get there.
Is that everything for you then?
Yeah, that was it. We talked on everything else.
All right, so I wanted to touch on a couple of small things here. We don't have to talk about this, but I thought it was kind of interesting. The scene with the Hound and Arya making their way to that little farmhouse there. And just listening to the guy talk about the events of the Red Wedding and stuff like that, you can definitely hear there's definitely hatred in the North and the Riverlands for what Walder Frey did there. He even said, like, or what it exactly, I don't remember exactly how he said it, but Walter Frey basically betrayed the laws of
Guest rights?
guest rights. There you go. Yep. Thank you. And then also, though, shortly after that, the Hound betrays the farmer guy there, basically takes his gold from him, which is kind of interesting. And Arya sits there and yells at him, and the Hound tries to explain, I've seen terrible people in this world and stuff. I know what it's like. You don't. Nick?
Yeah, I mean, again, one-dimensional characters. I think that the Hound caring for Arya is something new, or at least for her well-being enough till he gets paid. What that looks like, but yeah, he's still, as Arya said, the worst kind of person, and he's just like, he punches the old man and steals his silver when clearly they don't have it. to the Hound's credit, they're not maybe going to live long, but still, that's the caring for humanity and compassion that the Hound just does not have. What was your first point, Tyler? That was what made me raise my hand originally. Not the Hound and Arya, but
The anger the North and the Riverlands has towards
yes.
the Red Wedding.
I was going to say that's the first time that we hear in the world someone mentions that they're calling it the Red Wedding, and yeah, it speaks to how people perceive what actually happened. You know, it's like, yeah, it's a victory for the Lannisters, and the King Joffrey is seen as victorious. But yeah, there is dissension. You know, like I forget who mentioned it earlier, but it's hard to be dynamic and rule 7 kingdoms if you don't have a strong leader. You can see that the kingdoms are already unraveling. The dissension and the upsettedness that the old ways, maybe the old gods have against how people have been treating one another versus the people who are the newer, not necessarily the new gods. I don't know where that analogy came from, but the newer contemporary version of, yeah, we won the war versus, at what cost? Do the ends justify the means kind of a thing?
And I think it's also interesting that there's so many noble families and so many different kingdoms that the show tries to touch on what the common people think, but it doesn't often go to them. We spend a lot of time with the nobility instead, where now you can see this was a huge event. This would have been talked about far and wide, and obviously is. So you're seeing the reaction of the common people, the horror, and the Walter Frey. Now he's supposed to rule the Riverlands, and the Riverlands is very oh my God, what did you just do?
I was gonna say, you thought the Hound had a redemption arc, and they slammed the door on that. So I would say that the Hound's safe for another couple episodes because he's not having a redemption arc.
Another minor point I wanted to touch on was then also too, speaking of characters caring for one another, Sam sends Gilly to Molestown there to get away from Castle Black there, which I don't even know if sending them to Molestown is the best place to go, because the brother, I was just commented on by Maester Aemon there that they know the Night's Watch goes to Molestown to relieve tension and stuff like that there too. So how much safe, I know, relieves tension, everyone, in air quotes. But I don't know how much safer that's going to be there too. So Gary?
Say that Sam is not a worldly person other than what he sees in books. So as for resources that he has in that area of a place that he is within his grasp that he can move her to, Molestown is the best of bad situations. And at least she's not constantly around 100 men. She's only around a whole building full of whores. For some reason, a brothel is a safer place for a woman and a baby than, a keep. Nick?
The loyalty that Pod and Tyrion have, I think, is shadowed in the sweetness and care for one another that Gilly and Sam have. In that prelude scene where Gilly and Sam are talking about it, and Sam says he wants to move her somewhere safe, they almost, and feel free to contradict me, but they almost say they love each other. And when I heard that conversation go, he's like, I care for you, and Gilly looks at him as like, you think about me often? And Sam's like, yeah, and he changes the subject. There's something developing there. I think that Sam is sweet and kind enough. When they were at Craster's, he was gonna give her his mother's favorite thimble or something like that. He's not just sweet and kind, he's falling for her. And I don't know if she understands it enough, just coming from her background, but I think that she has something for him too. So that scene to me is such a sweet, touching moment because it really shows that Sam does care for her and wants her safe. Not just in a sense that she's around tomorrow, but maybe long term that she's around for him tomorrow. Amanda.
I also back to Gary's point about whether or not is Molestown safer. I would think, yeah, it's safer from the men of the Night's Watch, but the only thing that would worry me is that, yeah, there's not the Night's Watch immediately there, but it also doesn't have her protector of Sam with her either. So what do you do?
Mhm.
Gary?
Oh,
All I was gonna make a quick point, and that was off Nick's point about like, did they love one another? And I think it was really what she wanted. Is she wanted to realize like, oh well, all you think all these other men of the Night's Watch have naughty thoughts about me, and it's like, oh Sam, you have naughty thoughts about me too. Oh boy. Anyway, Steven, do you
Did
have
I
a
skip
comment on
Steven?
this?
I'm
you
sorry, Steven.
skipped me.
It's all right. He
Um,
deserved it.
I
Okay.
was just ignoring you, apparently. Sorry.
Also, Gary's comment was absolutely hilarious, so I'm glad I got to hear that. Anyways, what I was going to say, historically, I mean, up until very recent history, and some people would even say even not with recent history, a soldier's camp is no place for anyone who wants to be taken care of or be, taken care of or be safe. You talk about going back, even the Knights. You talk about the Knights Templar and the Knights that all we're talking about Knights in this thing too. Knights were historically bad people. Historically, they were not chivalrous. They were not nice. They were bad people. So I do think getting Gilly out of there is the number one concern and good, even if it's to a camp followers. Right? At least you're not immediately surrounded by soldiers. And especially if we're going back into the world of this, these are not soldiers here that are there by their own choice. These are soldiers there who are there for the specific reason of committing rape, of committing, stealing, of being born into the wrong family sometimes. But they're there because they're not generally good people. So that's another knock against keeping them at that fort.
I agree. The only thing is, though, like, Gilly's not just a woman to them. She's a wildling, which puts her in another degree of danger. And I mean, I don't think either place was safe for her, but it's interesting to wonder where. Granted, what was Sam supposed to do?
Speaking of wildlings, the brothel lady, she spoke with a lot of contempt about wildlings. You're not a wildling, are ya? Oh.
I mean, they all hate wildlings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone south of the wall hates wildlings. It's not
Anyway,
not
I
out
just
of
thought it was
common.
interesting when you mentioned like how much the Night's Watch hate wildlings. Is just like the brothel. Well, and also the brothel probably sees some latter conversations in this episode about what the wildlings can represent at their worst, and that's the only stories they're ever told. So, anyway,
And then
back to your question.
for my final point here, I wanted to throw out a thought experiment for everybody. And this kind of came to me actually just after rewatching the episodes here. Tywin mentions a lot about how Joffrey was kind of a bad king, not really controllable, didn't listen to his advisors and everything like that. He kind of just did what he wanted. And didn't even listen to his mother all that well. Do we think possibly that Tywin had a hand in Joffrey's eventual demise? To put
Definitely on the initial watch, I definitely thought that it was that Tywin was involved. On successional rewatches, I'm never quite as sure. Nick?
I think someone makes a comment. Maybe it was Tywin in jail, or somebody says something about to that extent, don't they? Like maybe Joffrey was getting too difficult to control, or something like that. When they're trying to decide who did it. I think it's definitely a possibility for some people to think, but Tywin, with what we've seen of him so far as the master manipulator, I don't think would have put himself in a position. I think that anything said is pure speculation. I don't think anyone really thinks that he could have done it.
I think we're in the same exact position that Amanda was talking about earlier, where, well, there's no way he could have done it, right? But could he have? But there's no way. But could he have? I mean, you could say that about everyone. I personally don't think that Tywin would leave a succession like this up to such chaos. You court chaos, you don't know what you're going to get. You might get good or you might get bad results. You don't know. And I think that Tywin had a good enough hold over Joffrey to where he thought that he might be able to continue to control or exert some influence. But I mean, there's always the "but could he have" sort of argument.
I just feel like if when you play the Game of Thrones, you either win or you die. Like in the
God.
next episode, you get the sense that there's some additional scheming happening about his little brother, and so I feel like if Tywin was involved, he would be definitely involved in the next step as somebody who wouldn't look. He'd look before he leaped, and based on how he doesn't seem to have a plan. Or maybe he had a plan and it was he needed to strike while the iron is hot, but I don't think that Tywin was involved. Any other thoughts? Others, we can go back to Tyler.
Like, if to me, Tywin doesn't seem likely just because of how much he would not. He hates Tyrion, and Tyrion's still alive.
Well, that's
However, I don't. I also can't see Tywin, if it's going to happen, being like, oh, well, I'm not going to stop it per se.
that's kind of the thing though too, of like it almost kills the two birds with one stone from Tywin's perspective. Of it gets rid of his son, which then kind of almost forces Jaime then to become head of the household finally, gets him on that part, because now there is no Lannister male heir. And then two, it gets rid of Joffrey, who is the uncontrollable kind of, king that they've seen so far. Yes, Tywin had some control over him, it felt like, but I would imagine that would probably only degrade as Joffrey got older and older and actually assumed more and more power that the king would have of controlling the kingdom. As I'm reading in the history of the World of Ice and Fire about how councils are set up to help kind of train and keep the realm kind of on task there while the young king became of age with some of the stuff there. That's kind of how that was going with Joffrey right now. But also though too, I think we kind of more get our answer next episode here of kind of what went on. But it's just kind of a thought experiment that came along with me of like, I wonder if Tywin did have a hand in it at some point in time, possibly. Gary.
Also, I think even not trying to spoil the next episode is that in the rewatch of Joffrey's death, you realize that Tyrion couldn't have been the patsy to begin with, because the circumstances in which he became the cupbearer were very much in the mayhem of Joffrey. And so that wasn't a for sure thing, so it made me very curious if Tyrion wasn't involved, who would have been the patsy? Anyway, curious if anyone thought that there was a different patsy involved.
All right, so that concludes episode 3 there. Just go back here. I'll pull up. I've got the IMDb stuff pulled up here again as we move into episode 4. So episode 3 was Break of Chains. Tyrion is arrested for the murder of Joffrey and awaits trial. Sansa escapes King's Landing. Sam sends Gilly to Molestown as the Night's Watch finds itself in a tight spot. And Meereen challenges Daenerys. Wow, I can't talk. All right. Episode 4, Oathkeeper. Jaime entrusts the task to Brienne. Daenerys frees Meereen. Jon is given permission to lead a group of Night's Watchmen to Craster's Keep. Bran and company are taken hostage. All right. We'll start off here with Nick here. What do you got for us?
So in this episode is where Jaime visits his brother, right? Doesn't this episode start off with him sparring with Bronn?
I think so.
Or towards the beginning enough?
One of the first ones.
One of the first scenes. Again, just, I love the character of Bronn because he just does not give a crap about what any highborn person thinks about him. And he's willing to knock Jaime into the dirt several times, which is a really interesting relationship that they're starting to have for one another. And yeah, he really kind of plants the seeds, and he explains that when his brother Tyrion was first incarcerated in the Vale, Jaime was who he named it as his champion, and how much he trusts and looks up to his older brother Jaime. So that really kind of sows the guilt that he goes and talks to him. And there's a lot of interaction. I had all my notes were about just Tyrion in the jail cell, for all of his scheming and wisdom and sageness that Tyrion has, he's constantly in jail or in a tight spot. And it's interesting to have such an inverse of someone who seemingly has so much power always be the person who has to get themselves out of trouble or rely on other people to get them out of trouble. And just the two brothers talking to each other about, you know, Tyrion's kind of joking with him, like, it's nice of you to come. Should I turn my back because Cersei's wanted you to kill me? And he said, do you really think I'd kill my brother? And Tyrion's asking, do you really think I'd ask you if, you know, if I had killed your son? And it's just interesting, sort of like we talked about in the previous episode, feeling each other out. You know, do you really think I would have done that? Or do you really think I'm capable of that? And it's interesting that they don't know. No one really knows. We don't really know, I think, at this point in the story, early in this episode, who may have been behind this. And yeah, it's just interesting to see that the characters come to that realization as well, as even we as omnipotent viewers don't know.
Was there a question at the end of that?
I could pose a question. I didn't know I had to form my answer in the form of a question.
Yeah, you were supposed to give us questions. You didn't know that?
You had a very full thought. You had a very full and thought out thought. So it was hard to.
All right, here's a question for Steven. Here's a question for Steven. Do you think that Jaime thinks Tyrion would have done it? Amanda, what's your response?
I think that... Oh, I'm sorry, Steven. Were you wanting to talk?
No, I want you to finish. Go for it.
It's fine. Whoever. Do you
sit here?
No, I agree. I think it's that same
understand?
thing.
Yeah.
It's that 5% of your brain that you don't know for sure. That where you do know they actually could have done it, but you don't know. You think they don't, and you like to believe that that's 100% a thing, but you can't be sure. You really can't. I don't think it was Tyrion, but I watched the episode.
There's a
But
scene
I
later.
think that's also. Oh, sorry.
Right. I was just gonna say there's a scene later that I don't want to steal from, but Littlefinger says a person without motive is a person no one suspects. And yeah, that's the whole premise there. Is the whole scene before Joffrey died was Joffrey pouring wine on his uncle and telling him he was cupbearer, and asking him to kneel at his wedding. So yeah, that's a lot of motive.
Well, I think that's also why, and what you alluded to, them feeling each other out, having that conversation one-on-one with each other, because you're going to have those small 5% doubts. And then you talk to them and you're like, no, well, I don't even know what I was thinking. No, that's not a thing. And I think that's what they get out right there.
I gave up my point. I was just going to say that I think in a previous episode, I think it's in season 1, right after a kid gets pushed out a window, there's an interaction between Tyrion and Jaime about, you wound me, that like I will do anything for my family. Like, so they've had interactions earlier on in the season where, like, obviously Tyrion, as much as he like doesn't like Joffrey, like, he would just never do that because he understands that that is still his brother's son. Not necessarily that it is his sister's son, but it's definitely his brother's son, that he would never do that to his brother. If it was Robert Baratheon's son, that kid didn't stand a chance.
Baratheon, air quotes.
Black of hair.
You got more, Nick?
You got any points?
That was the first point that I had, and then the second point I had was something later in the season. So we'll get to that point. I want to hear what the rest of you have first.
All right, go for
I
it.
don't want to jump too far ahead. What?
I just there was a quick scene, I think it might have been the opener of the episode, between Grey Worm and Nisande.
Yeah.
Where they kind of sort of try to dig into Grey Worm's past, and I think it sort of leans into what becomes kind of an interesting friendship between those two, where they both grew up as slaves, but Nisande really wants to know more about Grey Worm, and they wants to be better friends. Did anyone else see anything else there? Like, I think it was definitely trying to make those characters a little, as you said in the last episode, that like everyone around Daenerys is much more well fleshed out than Daenerys. It's fleshing those two characters out a little better. Tyler?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. There's basically fleshing out the backgrounds of two side characters of the story to try and make them a larger part of the grand story. Somebody that you kind of understand who they are and where they're coming from.
Okay. The next point I had is obviously Daenerys makes a choice about, you know, pinning up, I don't remember how many people it was, 100 and some?
163.
163. Nick's throwing gang signs up in front of the screen to try to make 163. And so my question to the group is, do you think Daenerys should have shown mercy or maybe found a different plan? Before you answer that, I think Steven has a point.
No, I just wanted to be the first one to comment.
On your look at Daenerys?
Oh, this was going to be my point. If someone didn't bring it up before me, this was my point. And I think that we talked a little bit before, and I said that I was going to talk about how Daenerys doesn't grow in character; she grows in cruelty. And this is what it is: she grows in cruelty. She literally, I mean, obviously, she doesn't actually crucify it because people would have thrown a fit if you did some like Christian stuff in a movie like that. If you parodied Christian stuff in a movie, I should say like this, but she crucified them. Let's not change that. She crucified 163 people and she sees that as justice for slain slave children. She inspired a slave uprising. I'm sorry, boo history. Slave uprisings are absolutely violent and bloody. There would have been thousands of masters who died. So to crucify an additional 163 and going, look at, they pay for everyone's sins because they get crucified. Like that's torture, straight in that. I mean, and again, just it's growth in cruelty is what she grows in. She grows in cruelty.
Nick, I don't agree, but I'll let Nick take the first counterpoint.
I was just going to comment that Steven said it accurately. Her line is, "I will answer injustice with justice." And that's the whole point of the premise that Steven is making, I believe, is what defines justice? Who gets to define what that justice looks like? So to her, yeah, it comes off as cruelty. It seems just because, you know, we're stuck with the vision of mutilated children or slaves, slavery. But yeah, it's really, you know, who gets to decide what justice is? Even to the conversations we've been having about all of her wise advisors, Barristan Selmy tries to advise against it as well, saying sometimes mercy is more beneficial. And she strays from these great advisors we've been praising, and in her own leadership style decides to do something herself. So maybe that comes home to roost.
I mean, obviously, answering justice with injustice. That's because Batman isn't in this world. But I will say, you were talking in the previous episode how Sansa learns from the people around her. If you put that same bullshit on Dany, the people that she learns from are her brother, who's a cruel son of a bitch who sells off his own blood to the Dothraki.
How many seasons he's been dead for?
And then her most trusted advisor, who as the audience you realize once like was in a plot to try to murder her, but had a change of heart. Her other advisor, who is the Kingsguard for her father and the usurpa, like she's trying to learn from these other people, and she's got Dario Mablaris, and
oh my god, this is going well. This is going so well.
Anyway, but
all right,
I think that she's just given the tools that she has, and in a world that all she's grown up with is the Unsullied who were around slavers who cut off their dicks and made them murder children. Like, she thinks this is a just, like, start with that as your moral compass, Nick. Imagine that you just freed people with no dicks and had to murder a child in order to get their promotion. Like hanging some freaking slave masters on some trees doesn't seem that crazy in that sort of world. Steven, I think I can dig a little deeper. I'll let Steven.
I'm just okay. So you're right. Her brother's been dead for a while, and yes, she learned a little bit of cruelty from him. But what she also learned is specifically that she should not be like him. That's why that's why her husband poured a pot of boiling freaking gold on his head to give him a crown. She learns from these other advisors, regardless of what their pasts are, that they have not revealed to Dany, by the way, regardless of what their pasts are, they are advising her a different way. They are advising her in a merciful route, and she's ignoring those advisors. She's not learning from her advisors. She's ignoring her advisors. And I think Nick made a very good point that we were talking before about how brilliant her advisors are, and maybe that's one of the reasons she doesn't have to grow as a character. She's now, like Nick said, ignoring those advisors. And we will see what happens when she ignores her advisors. What's the end goal when she stops listening to the smart people in the room and starts trying to go on what she thinks is the right route?
The advisors only exist as a counterpoint that there was another choice. The
advisors were the point.
If they
had the point,
another advisor similar to the King's Council had said like you should murder like the young Targaryen babe, like before she can become a usurpa. If she had someone like that around her, nobody would have questioned it. But because it came out of her own head, I don't know.
No, I disagree.
If Joffrey is gone, I'm gonna start rooting for Daenerys being a much more fleshed out character than anyone gives credit for. Steven, I'll throw it back to you. I've been
one last comment. My last comment on this is the damning evidence that after his boy Joffrey died, he switched to his girl Dany. There should be no better evidence at how bad and horrible a character Dany is. And I'll leave it there.
But my new favorite word is usurpa.
Usurpa.
I mispronounce it?
Usurper. Just a little bit. It's close enough. It's my new favorite word now, Gary. Usurper with an R.
That and Richard Stark.
Usurpa? Karl Stark.
Karl Stark. Karl Stark.
What?
Usurpa. Anyway, things that don't matter for 500, and we can move on. Tyler, do you have any opinions on the grave I dug for whether or not Dany had a better choice or should have shown mercy?
I mean, I'm going to let you keep digging your own grave here, Gary. I already joined you once tonight with that, but really there, like, this kind of goes into the way they played Dany up for the TV viewing audience where, slavers bad. Let's murder slavers. They're terrible people and stuff like that. That's the way Dany's kind of played up for the TV audience there too. She wants to answer the injustice of murdering these slaves and having these slaves with the justice. That's also kind of the way we think about it too. The justice of the real world, that slavery is bad. I mean, obviously murdering a bunch of slave masters and stuff like that is not really the way we think about going about it nowadays. They should at least be tried, convicted, and sentenced to jail. But medieval feudal world there, the next best thing to locking people in jail is just killing them.
Is this maybe
there are better ways to kill them?
Is this maybe the opposite of the redemption arcs elsewhere in the show, and this is sort of the where
corrosion arc?
What was the word?
corrosion. I'm going to say it's the corrosion arc.
She's acidic. Her acidic
Her
arm.
pH balance is off.
I love it.
Yeah, I think you're sort of cheering for her because she's, trying to fight slavery, but the way in which she does it just doesn't really sit right. But I don't know. It definitely raised some questions on the initial watch and a rewatch of like, oh, well, this was a little extreme. I think on the initial watch, obviously I have no soul. I'm not a full ginger, but I married one. Is that when on the initial watch, I think you just assume she made a bad choice, but you just don't assume that it was like it's gonna bite her in the ass. Like, and so that's how I would take it. On the rewatch, it bites her in the ass. Spoiler alert. Consequences happen. But anyway, I don't know, Nick or Steven, on the initial watch that you watched this many, many moons ago, did you foresee that this was going to bite her in the ass, or do you just see that it was of a multiple choice question, this was not the best answer?
I think my thing there would be I did not like her on my initial watch either, and I did think that she was growing in a wrong way. I'm not going to pretend like I assumed that this would really bite her in the butt. I didn't. There'd been so many things that have happened that maybe didn't have any recourse up to now in Dany's adventure. I definitely would say I was very uncomfortable when I saw her crucifying people. I was very I thought it was the wrong choice. I can't say that I thought it would really have consequences though.
Nick?
I'd agree with that. I don't think I foresaw that it would have consequences. To be honest, maybe I saw more rose-colored glasses when thinking of Daenerys the first time I saw this. I don't think she was the hero of this whole story of Game of Thrones, but I definitely felt that she was more.
We've already introduced the hero of the revolution, so
no, that's
we do have a hero of the resolution still.
Hashtag Jon Snow, hero of the story.
Hero of the story.
Ooh.
I think that I did definitely see Daenerys as someone who could do no wrong. And on a rewatch, I am more aware of these little darker tendencies that she may have. Either, again, having read the history of the world of Ice and Snow too, as something that more Targaryens have darker tendencies, or that there's more a pretense of things that they do, not just that are bad, but like Steven keeps saying the word cruel. And so I'm more aware of some of these things maybe earlier on that I just saw as, Danny's doing the right thing, getting rid of slavery. But now, like on a second rewatch, it's more of like, I don't know, is that the right choice? And maybe sort of hemming and hawing a little bit on it more so.
Any other thoughts on that? Otherwise, my next point that already got kind of covered was the Kingslayer brothers, which I guess on an initial watch, I don't know if that joke landed quite as well as it did on a rewatch. That like
I agree.
you sort of understand that like Jamie owns that so much, and I think it's either earlier, I think it's late in this episode, where he owns it enough that he literally writes in the Kingsguard book that like that is his history. Is it this episode? The previous episode.
It's not Jamie who writes that. It would be who's ever the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard before him. So it's Sir Barristan Selmy would have wrote that in there.
I think Jamie wrote that because Jamie is now the leader of the Kingsguard.
Yeah.
After Barristan Selmy left.
Yeah, every member who joins the Kingsguard has his history basically written in there by the commander of the King's Watch, or the Kingsguard there. Sir Barristan Selmy was the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard when Jamie joined originally, so he would have written the information in there for Jamie's great deeds.
That is that Jamie added that in there, but maybe not Nick.
in that blip when they read that little passage, and again, Joffrey read it too. Remember in a previous episode, they say that Jaime won his spurs at 6 and 10, and in that tourney is when Aerys the Mad King named him to the Kingsguard as sort of a stick it to you to Tywin Lannister. And so at 16 years old, Jaime would have been in the Kingsguard, and soon thereafter would have become the Kingslayer. So he wouldn't have written it about himself at 17, 18. Because clearly Jaime now, as the new King's Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, is the older version of himself, where he said, "It's my duty to write in this book now about other members." I don't think he would have written it about himself. I mean, he doesn't really even like the moniker Kingslayer. It's just something that everybody else called him. Like when he's bringing it up to Brienne, he sort of detests it because nobody understands that he saved 500,000 people.
Also, I think because Tyrion understands that his brother really doesn't like that moniker, and that it is truly like he feels similar to Tyrion, that he got accused of a murder that he didn't commit or that he shouldn't have been blamed for. Like, he murdered somebody for the greater good. And I think Tyrion, kind of brings some levity to that situation and be like, haha, we're the Kingslayer brothers, because I think maybe it's a realization that he has taken on this moniker that his brother never wanted of killing a king, and now Tyrion owns it, even if he's proven innocent, he will never ever be able to get out of this shadow that he was very strongly accused of killing a king. So, any other thoughts on that? Otherwise, my next fun is with Lord Baelish. Lord Baelish.
Is he Scottish now?
I was thinking of my Sean.
Lord Baelish.
Lord Baelish. Hashtag Lord Baelish did nothing wrong, just because that's what Tyler did earlier. I'm joking. Baelish is a horrible human being.
He's not even fun enough to be one of my favorite characters. So, I guess on a rewatch, on an initial watch, it didn't really stick that, because the last time you saw Lord Baelish, he was still in King's Landing, and so I just assumed he kind of sort of snuck out during the wedding and was in the ship. But it's implied on a rewatch that he's assumed to be in the Vale. He's assumed to be nowhere nearby. And so he says, he's not a suspect because he shouldn't have been there. He wouldn't have, there was no possibility he was there. He had an alibi. But he never clearly explains his co-conspirators. But he does give very, on a rewatch, very just interesting, and obviously he's not going to tell Sansa who his co-conspirators are either, but he gives very interesting explanations of my new friends are predictable and very responsible people. As far as what happened to Joffrey, that is something my new friends wanted very badly. So I thought it was interesting that, he talks about them as his new friends. So he was playing the Game of Thrones. He was, making some new friends, because as far as the Lannisters know, he's still loyal to the Lannisters, but he made some new friends who maybe can help him along the way. Nick?
I was going to say, Baelish, to me, sees everything as a transaction. I can make this happen. Someone will pay me for it, and I will make it happen. There's no, oh, but this person has this, or this person has this power over me. It's transactional. It's all black and white. He doesn't really think or care about who is being affected by these transactions. He mentions his new friends are very powerful. And so Sansa even compares it too, saying the Lannisters made you rich and made you Lord of Harrenhal. You got so much from them. And so for him to betray them, coming clean, saying that he had a hand in Joffrey's death, it really highlights how much more powerful his new friends must be.
Just maybe even not talking about his new friends, but just how unreliable of an ally the Lannisters have become or how unreliable Joffrey is as somebody who can do him a favor. Honestly, he got Harrenhal, but he's your boy Joffrey. He's really not probably in a real secure position with the Lannisters. The last real like promotion he got was like he gained Harrenhal for his help during the matter of the succession. Bad words for bad pronunciation for Gary again. Ulysses.
Yes.
Ulysses. Anyway, any other thoughts on the Baelish part of this episode? It's really kind of a follow-up to the scene between Sansa and Baelish from the last episode. Kind of as the general shock of who saved Sansa is over in the last episode. This one's more about like, oh, well, why did you do this?
I would say
I
it's
agree.
just touching more on to my point I made earlier of how Sansa learns from everybody kind of around her. So she's talking to Baelish more about the situation that happened there, trying to, I think, in her side, understand why he did what he did or why Baelish does what he does, just kind of gaining more cursory knowledge or just kind of trying to understand how some of these people think.
I think you're right, 'cause she even says to him, like, at one point, like, as she's talking things through, she's, like, reasoning it out also. She said at one point, like, "No, I don't believe you. You wouldn't do it for that." And, like, she's reasoning it out to herself as she understands him and his motives. And then he even tells her at one point when she's like, "Well, what do you want?" And he's like, "I want everything."
Dangerous man.
Yes.
Terrifying
Yes, he is.
man.
Ambition.
He would rule the ashes if he could. Some would
Yeah,
say.
yeah. That was
Yep.
a Varys line, wasn't it?
That was a Varys line.
Yes, it was.
Such good characters.
Are we getting closer to the part of the episode that you want to take back over? Otherwise, I'll keep rolling. With
I-
the new Night's Watch.
Well,
I could do one really quick.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't remember where my scene was, but it was towards the end, I want to say, of this episode. I don't know, maybe it was towards the beginning and I'm getting tired. But we're introduced to a young man in this episode from a small hamlet town who stays at the who's introduced to the Night's Watch.
Oh.
Okay.
oh, yep,
Nick,
yep, the little
this is
kid.
the same-
Yeah.
This is the same person I'm
Ollie.
talking about. He's
Ollie.
the best friend of the hero of the revolution.
And it again, so we're two things in that scene. We're introduced to again the crows, not the crows, the wildlings are causing havoc south of the Castle Black, trying to draw out the crows. But also, this young boy makes his way to Castle Black. And again, we talk about how there's no females in Castle Black; it's only men. This is also the only boy at Castle Black. And so, of that age, generally. And so it's interesting that I think that there's something there where he has a greater part to play. His whole family's slaughtered. And he could have just been this messenger boy who shows up and says hey to Jon Snow. But he's just kind of like hanging around.
He doesn't just show up to Castle Black. He was actually sent there by the wildlings that attacked his village.
Exactly. To give him a message, to say, we're here and we're going to attack the rest of the people south of the wall. And so he does have a purpose, but once he's there and he tells Jon Snow, because like Jon Snow's going to make some proclamation about having folks available or what's going on, the little boy is still there. And so I'm just curious, who is this little boy? Does he have some greater purpose or something?
Yes. No
I mean,
spoilers.
Yes.
Yes.
The Night's Watch,
He
what
is
are they
later
really going to
season.
do? Send him back south of the wall where the wildlings are? Or send him to
He's a
Molestown?
boy. He can't stay and fight. What's he supposed to do?
Well, exactly. Like, where are they supposed to send him,
no,
though?
definitely.
But, I mean, they... Go for it, Steven. I think you might be aiming to where I'm going.
I'm playing
No,
devil's
I
advocate.
disagree with that. I believe he is a boy. He can fight. I mean, you want to take a different different road completely here. Imagine the Battle of Helm's Deep, where they're outfitting every small child with equipment that doesn't fit, and they're doing it because they need the manpower. And as a young boy, you can still fight. You have child soldiers all over the world, unfortunately, especially at this time, and they are in a grave and dire situation. They can't come out to fight the wildlings because they will get probably overrun. They need him. Why would you send away even if it's not an able-bodied man, but an able-bodied soldier?
I was playing devil's advocate, but I will cede my question to Steven's comment, because Ollie does throw out that he was the best archer in his Hamlet, and everybody laughs at him, but he does have some skill with a weapon.
To Steven's point about Helm's Deep, I'll show you my Helm's Deep. And he does become a character who does have some more lines going forward, and some more. He does become battle hardened. He'd make some kills. So yeah. I don't know why Nick said that. Obviously Nick has forgotten what the hell happens in this movie. So
Nick is playing devil's advocate about this show.
I completely forgot about him. He's a forgettable character. So whatever. I mean,
the person who kills his dad is Ygritte. That was something I picked up on a rewatch too.
Oh, that's interesting.
Really?
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, she shoots him with an arrow, doesn't she?
Walking with his father, and he says he's the best archer in his Hamlet, and his father dies from Ygritte's arrow.
His mother
and like he gets a good look at her too.
He does.
Interesting.
We'll tuck that one away.
Yeah.
Put a pin in it. All right. Did you have more, Gary, or?
I do have more. I was just trying to give Nick some time, because he loves to talk. Yes, I just noticed on the rewatch that the new trainee is the friend of the hero of the revolution, and on the initial watch, it's just like, gosh, this guy looks familiar. Sort of the other guy in the King's Watch who used to be the head of the City Watch, who just sort of moves. But like on a first watch, you're like, I don't know. He looks kind of familiar, but I don't remember where I've seen him before. But on the rewatch, you realize he's offered a holdfast for whoever can kill Jon Snow. That's why he ends up going to the Night's Watch, is because the hero of the revolution will give him a holdfast. For whoever kills Jon Snow.
It's the hero's
Roose
father,
Bolton.
Roose Bolton.
Roose Bolton.
Because the hero has no power to do that.
Senior hero of the revolution.
Hero of the revolution, senior.
Your boy Joffrey.
Your boy Joffrey. Anyway, any other? Did anyone else catch that either on initial or a rewatch? Like,
I didn't.
I mean,
I'll admit, I did not catch that the first. I don't remember what happens with that storyline. He's got a mole, but I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, in one of my many rewatches, I picked up on that because it is a line that you have to kind of be paying attention for.
The next time I had was that Brienne names the Valyrian steel blade Oathkeeper. And I guess on the initial watch and on the rewatch, I never quite understood the Jaime gives away the sword, because I would assume that it probably has like a lion pommel, like it's probably specially designed to fit Jaime's, sexy hands. So anyway, Tyler.
So Jaime actually, if you listen to kind of what Jaime's saying in his speech of giving the sword to Brienne, I mean, yes, it is designed for the Lannister. It does have a lion head pommel on it. But he's saying the sword is made from ice. You were given, it should be used to protect Ned and Catelyn Stark's children there. He kind of says they don't know what happened to Arya. She's probably dead, but we should find Sansa and you should be the one to protect her since... I'm fuzzy on this part here. Did he say I swore an oath to protect the children, or you swore an oath to protect Catelyn Stark and her family.
You, Brienne.
Yeah.
I think it was you.
So it should be that this, the Stark family sword, what the reforged part of the Stark family sword should be used to protect the Stark family again.
I don't think, again, in all of this turmoil and uncertainty about who actually did kill your boy Joffrey, I think that it is the previous scene where Cersei tells Jaime, if I asked you to go right out and find Sansa and bring back her head, would you do it? That sows the uncertainty for Jaime of, no, she wouldn't have done this. And so instead he charges Brienne to go out and save Sansa and find her from wherever she is. And so that's part of the reason why he's giving her this reforged sword, which was originally from ice. It should be used, like you mentioned, Tyler. He references it should be used to protect her daughters. He says Arya's probably dead, but if you can find her, that as well.
Yeah. As I always say, if there's a redemption arc, they're not long for this world. So, the next point I had was about I forgot the leader of the Night's Watch, what his name was.
Gior Mormont.
No.
The acting commander?
The acting commander.
Tyler's Alistair Thorne.
Alistair Thorne. He gives Jon Snow leave to go fight the
Craster's Keep, the mutineers.
And I guess on a rewatch of the people he takes, you notice that he takes the Hero of the Revolution's friend with him. And do you think that he is allowed to go because forgot his name already. 30 seconds later. Alistair Thorne knows that he's gonna betray Jon, or is it just the fact that a recruit volunteered to help, and if you send a recruit out, the likelihood of success dwindles greatly, that not only will they die, but they probably will ruin the surprise just a little bit more. Nick?
I think that was the actual comment too. Is I don't know his first name, but Slint,
Janos.
who was the original. What?
Janos Slint.
Janos Slint, who was the original Night's Watch, the original Kingsguard leader, who's now at the Wall, who's the Iago in
the commander.
Who's like the Iago in Alistair Thorne's ear, telling him if you do send Jon Snow, he'll likely die at the hands of the mutineers at Craster's Keep, and you won't have to worry about him. So then when a recruit says, I'll go with him, I think that just sort of plays into their narrative. I don't think that they're in cahoots. Again, I don't remember what happens with Locke in the story, so I don't know. But I think that just plays into their, that will be even better. Send him with a recruit. So I don't think that they know each other or that they're in cahoots about it. I think it's just something else that they're like, take all the weakest people, most novice folks you can find.
Yeah, I think you got a bit of an Occam's razor going there. You have, instead of one hyper complex, plot going on, you just have two plots that happen to be going at the same time.
Yeah. Anything else on that one with your razors? And then the last point I had is that you see the Night King, and he turns a baby and gives the baby blue eyes. Like he's some sort of eugenist or something like that.
Whoa, that took a very different path than I thought it would.
I enjoyed the look on Steven's face where he's like, yeah, and then he's like, no. Sorry, I had to go dark. I'm not that person. I apologize. I've dug enough holes today. Tyler?
I'm kind of wondering here, too, of so Craster has been sacrificing his male children, obviously, for quite a while. Is the baby that is sacrificed, is that just a standard white? Or I think they're called whites. The underlings are called whites. Or
the others.
Does he no, the others are technically the other White Walkers then. I think does the baby that's turned get turned into a commander White Walker type thing there?
This was my exact question that I was going to pose to the group too, because it doesn't answer it, does it?
Not exactly, I don't think.
No.
But sorry, Nick, go ahead.
You're good. You're good. Finish your thought.
I was always confused by it, but I think yes. I think it does transfer them because I think the whites are made
Into
when they kill like a person and then bring them back to life.
So you think it transfers them into a commander is what you're thinking?
Yeah, but I have to wonder how many of the others Craster was single-handedly like populating here.
Yeah,
That was
I would believe that if that's true, that those turn into the elites. Like Craster, like made all of the boss battles in later seasons.
single-handedly keeping that army supplied. I paused at that point because when you see the one walk up who touches the baby in the background, I have paused it and I counted how many others there are behind him, and there's 13. And so I was really interested to see, like, is that something that, yeah, if it is that these ones grow into that, how many are there? And so that was my thought I was going to pose to you too, is the same premise, but I counted 13, including the one who was walking forward, as far as generals or elites.
That's a good call, and that's something I'll be looking for in the future as well. What I was going to pose maybe to the group is, with Craster does it say how long Craster has been camped there and how long he's been sacrificing children? Because I feel like even 13, after what he's doing to his quote unquote wives, I feel like that's a very low amount of boys to be able to have sacrificed. Mm-hmm. And I'm also just confused how they make the baby to elite commander jump. I mean, that's a promotion if you ever get one, but it's a little confusing to me, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But again, I no idea myself.
Yeah, do they become the others and then they have to grow into being, full-fledged adults, or is that something that maybe there's a deeper story there that at this point in the episode / story we just don't know yet? So interesting. Mm-hmm. My question was going to be really quick. Where do you think we are? Because it shows them like walk up to this huge like structure, an ice place where there's like the Aurora Borealis and Northern Lights going on. And I was really trying to like decide, because I love locations, and trying to understand where we were in the world. Because Craster is north of the wall, but then the others have to be on the other side of Mance's party in the far north. Otherwise, they would have ran through them. But where they were seemed like this sort of ice palace place. It wasn't just this little monolith, sanctuary place with the 4 little pillars or whatever there were in the middle. It looked like, from a larger pulled back perspective, when the horse is walking closer, they're in front of some sort of gigantic, structure. So I was just curious, where do you propose we were in that situation?
Elsa's abandoned castle.
I have no idea where the hell we were. I had an answer to a much earlier question, which was the ages of the whites. And that is, let's assume that when Craster's children are there, he calls them Craster's daughters. So let's assume, bad math, he has one girl, and then you have 15, and then you say the next one, their daughters are 15, so let's say they're 30-ish years, about 15 years old for the babies that would have been stolen. So I would say that those are just the 13 original boys that Craster donated, and maybe the rest are just kind of growing up in a little camp,
Upstate New York. They're in an upstate.
Oh, no.
They're in the Avengers training camp of White Walkers.
They're in a better place. They're upstate somewhere at a farm.
White Walkers winter camp.
But I do believe that they are probably an elite level, because all the other White Walkers you see are just like the dead who become risen. But then you see this upper class that maybe were human and didn't have to die. They more kind of evolve into the White Walker. They become a higher being. And so I think they probably just, age maybe at an accelerated rate, but they still have to grow into being icy killing machines. So, Tyler, you're up next.
So you brought up a kind of an interesting point that I hadn't completely thought of there, Nick, of the fact that Craster's Keep is, I think they say, for some reason, 60 miles.
60 miles.
Yeah, 60 miles north of the wall.
60 miles.
So then beyond that is Mance's camp, or the ever-growing army of the wildlings there, basically. So the White Walker, which I'm assuming they mainly inhabit, and I don't know exactly what it's called off the top of my head right now, the area that's north of north, basically. It's like the Forever North or whatever.
Lands of Neverwinter.
Lands of Neverwinter, that's what it is. I'm assuming that's probably where they are, because that's the eternal wintry cold hell that basically they would probably occupy. So it's kind of curious, though, that the White Walker traveled from way up there through the army, basically, picked up the baby at Craster's, and went back there, basically, all kind of shortly, while the baby is still technically alive there.
Devil's advocate, that might not be the same baby. That could be the baby you saw in season 1.
What?
Okay, okay.
The baby from season 1, who's in transit, they have to probably go to the sea. Maybe there's an underground, tunnel that the White Walkers use to get to the north.
No.
Season 1, what are you talking about, though?
Are the original species of the North. So you would have to assume they have evolved better navigation routes than humans who need to stay moderately warm.
The original inhabitants of the land were the children of the forest.
And the giants.
Is the world of ice and fire stuff and giants.
Anyway, I'm guessing it's just plot armor.
Okay. So,
ahead, Steven.
What I was going to say is that there's no way that baby, regardless of whether it's from season 1 or season now, makes it up all the way to the Neverwinter, because babies are fragile motherfuckers and they need to stay fucking warm, and they will not make that journey. And I don't think it's inconceivable for the White Walkers, who seem to have mastery of that land, to have multiple shrines. I think it's very conceivable that they have a shrine or temple, whatever you want to call it, fairly close to Castor's Keep. Why else would they have singled out Castor to give babies in the first place?
Who's Castor?
I mean, that is something I would love to learn, that history there. But they just go from the Neverwinter, travel several hundred miles down to Castor, like, hey, bro, you want to give us a baby?
So, a couple things. First of all, yes, babies are super fragile, but again, this is a world with dragons and magic. So, grain of salt. I do like your idea, though. I do like your idea of that there are multiple special sanctuary places where this stuff could happen. Also, when you were talking about that, it made me think of how the Craster's wives, women, were saying feed the gods or praise the gods or whatever like that. So, they're bought in on this. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Were they sacrificing babies in the forest and the ones took them? Or were the ones around and they sacrificed to the gods and they started taking babies? We can get back to that. The one note that I originally raised my hand on, Gary, I got to give you props on this, because this was your comment that I was like, oh, light bulb. Maybe our math numbers aren't evening out with how many kids Craster has sacrificed, because there can only be 13 elites. Sam killed one with obsidian. It's the first time we've seen one die. Maybe that's why they got to make another one with this little babe.
You're saying they eat the rest? They eat all the other babies, and then
they don't make it, like Steven said.
Yeah, or just convert them into the lower level.
They're eating them, but
foot soldiers.
So somebody has.
Why would you need to keep it? Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, what season 1 baby are we talking about here?
The first time we meet Craster, he puts a baby out, and then Jon sneaks out to see what he's doing. He catches Jon Snow and turns him back into Gior's folks, and Gior, scolds him outside.
So that would be season 2, though.
Yes.
That makes yeah.
I like my there can only be 13 or a set whatever the number is. And so
But why? Why would there only need to be 13?
I don't know. Why are there
Symbology
7
of the
gods?
13. There can be only one. I mean,
There can be only one.
Or
Hey,
maybe
that's
they have their own court. Maybe like the Night King wasn't always the Night King. Maybe
this is the Supreme Court of Ice People.
they have their own
Back to the night court.
houses.
Back to night king's court.
There's the
Yeah,
there's
maybe
the
there's
Targaryens.
only 12 and a night king.
They're the Targaryens of the North. Anyway, conspiracy theory.
did you have
That is
anything else,
all
Derek?
I have for this episode. So we can go to the next person.
Amanda, what'd you have?
Elena and Marjorie have an interesting little conversation, the two of them. Part of it was in the previous episode, but we didn't really touch on it too much. Elena at one point says something to Marjorie about, do you think I'd let you marry that monster or beast or whatever she called him?
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if this is the exact same thing of Marjorie being like, did she do it? Can I?
Oh, Grandma.
Yeah, do I know you well enough? In this case, do I like the results enough to argue with it or to look into it?
Mm-hmm.
Instead, she tells Marjorie to go ahead and focus on her next, I almost said target, but really it is her next target, Tommen. Do we think, are we blaming Elena? Are we looking at Lord Baelish? Do we think it's everyone?
Yes.
I think that Olenna specifically, not like the Tyrells, because Mance is a patsy. Her Olenna's son. I think Olenna is the powerful new friend that Baelish references. Is my understanding.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
I'll admit, I was surprised that Marjorie seemed absent or unknowns to that. I thought that she might have had at least knowledge of it.
And we talked about this in the previous episodes that I assumed that Marjorie was the one who poisoned it. The one
You
who
did.
poisoned
Hardcore.
the cake.
You were
I
wrong.
just assumed that Marjorie poisoned the cake. So
Right? She had a little bit of innocence in her still. She doesn't seem to have a clue. Or she doesn't seem like it. She's proven herself a good actress. Enough to be able to manipulate Joffrey.
She's just going for the wrong guy. She should be going for Pod. Pod is the one for her.
Pod for King.
Pod for King.
Pod is too sweet for Marjorie.
Pod is no longer in the capital at the end of this episode, so
Yes.
Beware of fast women. Pod is too good for Marjorie.
yeah.
Okay.
That was a good scene though. There's not, I feel like of good scenes of political espionage in King's Landing, any scene with those two characters is always good.
That is true. That is very true.
Unfortunately, I think at the end of this scene, she says she's going back to Highgarden, and secretly in my mind, I was like, I'm kind of sad because she is like the angry, bitter grandma character disappears from the show for a while, and I'm a little sad.
We'd kind
I
of
agree with you, though. Sorry. I'm just going to say that it's when the Queen of Thorns is in the show or when Tywin is in the show, you are going to have some clever, witty, I don't even know what to say because I'm not that clever or witty. But you're going to have high-level conversation. You're going to have spy thrillers. You're going to have diplomatic cunning. You're going to have just statescraft that actually makes you go, whoa, that was fun to watch, which is hard to do, and they deserve credit for it.
That was my comment too, was just, she's the one person we've all commented before in previous episodes who seems like she could stand toe-to-toe with Tywin in a political debate. And yeah, it's just interesting to see. There are few people who could challenge that. Maybe like Oberyn Martell, who has a little interaction in this episode as well with Tywin. And there's just some stuff there that's going on. But yeah, I think that Elena definitely brings everyone else up a level when she's in the show. Another fantastic actress.
All right. Do you have anything else, Amanda?
The only other thing was same thing with Marjorie again. She visits Tommen, gives him a little visit during the evening. And Tommen says something like, I'm not allowed to have visitors. She's like, oh, well, I'm not a visitor. I'm your bride.
Ask
Clever.
Definitely planting the seeds early.
Mm-hmm. She says this can be their secret. They'll have several secrets. And they bond over a little bit over his cats, Sir Pounce. Cute name, by the way. And Tommen does throw out there a little mention about how Joffrey had always threatened to kill the cat. So I think Tywin's words were probably also taken to heart. They were not. Tommen and Joffrey, not best buds.
So that was actually one of my points, was I was going to riff off of that area just to get to Sir Pounce. And something that I looked up on Sir Pounce, because I am an avid cat lover, and so I obviously looked into the history of Sir Pounce. Why wouldn't I? And one of the kind of ironic things is, Joffrey makes a lot of comments about killing cats and about skinning cats, shooting cats, all that sort of stuff. And it contrasts to the Starks in terms of, so Joffrey's technical, real, I should say, sigil is a giant cat. And he's fine with killing all these cats. The Starks is the direwolf, and they get small little direwolves, which they're encouraged to kill, but they go ahead and take care of them. It's just a little bit of a difference between the two. Sorry, but read a lot into Sir Pounce. I know the history of Sir Pounce now, so you're all aware.
I didn't know there was a history for Sir Pounce. That's
There
adorable, though.
Is there fan fiction or is it actual history?
After tonight, there will be, okay?
It's a whole furries thing. You don't want to get
The
into.
Adventures of Sir Pounce.
That is a good point, though. That is their mascot is the lion.
Sorry.
Mascot.
Whatever.
Sorry,
Sigil.
Linda.
It is the lion, and he does make those comments about cats all the time. Very much at odds with how you would treat your sigil usually, whereas everyone else worships theirs.
Except for the Tyrells. Like
That's true.
Long.
I love Elena's remarks about that. I don't remember when it was. A rose. Who's scared of a rose?
Doesn't she have a comment too? Like she's like, I have a rose on my chamber pot, as if it made it smell any better.
Yeah.
Love her.
Anything else, Amanda?
Nope.
All right. Steven, what do you got?
I have two comments. One of them is the departure of Podrick Payne and of Brienne. Podrick is just, it is a heartwarming scene. They bring him out. They're like, hey, you're going to be helping out Brienne. Give him Tyrion's axe from the Battle of Blackwater Bay.
Yep.
And you can see just the pride welling up in Pod as all this is happening. And Bronn at one point goes, well, go take care of your lady. And it's just like it's something you don't see a lot from Bronn, but this like brotherly, like, hey, yeah, go for it, man. You're doing great. Go for it.
It's cool.
I love that scene. It's fantastic. The second thing, and this was actually something I had to look up, talking about the 13, technically the one White Walker and his 13 or 12 ice clones, or however you want to call them. This is literature. We are watching a movie based on literature. Literature has many allusions in it, and I'm wondering if this
good literature has many allusions.
Good literature, yes. If this could be indirect. I mean, we've talked about crucifixion in the last one. We're now talking about this one guy and his 12 followers. Does that strike you as anything of? And that's, I was just looking at that. I was like, is this some kind of? Gary might be right. It might just be bunk. But if you have one White Walker and 12 followers of that White Walker, that seems like an intentional decision.
Interesting.
And there's no way, I don't think, as someone who's writing these books for so fucking long, George R. R. Martin, get your ass together. But anyways, as someone who's writing these for so long, it seems like a hard detail to miss and to not say, does this seem like... Yeah.
I think that the story of the White Rockers is something about the numerology of how many are there. I go back to, I think, the end of season 1, where I counted the number of people in the background of the scene when Daenerys like jumps into the fire, and like the numerology of how many followers she had at that point was like 50, and the next season she has like 12 people following her. Like, it's just background characters. It doesn't matter. Like, they just are filling the background with people. Doesn't really have any significance, Tyler.
So I want to say, maybe caution us to be a little careful about crediting this to George, because I don't actually think this scene is in the books, because to kind of explain a little bit too, this is another part where the books diverged from the show, or the show diverged from the books. There is actually no Night King, as we're calling him now in the show here. There is nothing called the Night King in the books. There's the Night's King, which is believed to kind of be part of the White Walkers, but he's not confirmed like our Night's King in the show is. So I don't know if the symbology is
That's
there
fair.
from the show showing the 12 or 13 people behind the guy or not, but it is a nice kind of symbolic thing for the show, because if it is 13 people, I would lean more towards the side of 13 being an unlucky number or a bad number, as we've kind of taken it on to mean here.
I think I was going to comment on Gary's question about the number of people there at the end of season 1 when she's in the fire or comes out of the fire. Yes, there's a lot of people there because that was the first time that really she went into the fire, whereas in the start of season 2 they've been wandering the red wastes and people are dying from dehydration and food loss. So I think that's the discrepancy maybe in the numbers. Regardless of who scripted it, whether it was George R. R. Martin's adding, I'm losing my words as well, whether it was George R. R. Martin's intent to help direct that scene, or if it was the director's D&D in this episode who had them there, it did seem very intentional, to Steven's comment, to have them all spaced out behind everybody. Like I said, I paused it specifically because I realized I could count that there were 13. If they were just background other characters there, they might have been overlapped or just kind of standing in the background as a crowd behind the one who came forward who touched the babe. But they're specifically evenly spaced out in a straight line behind them. So it just seemed really intentional to have that many or lined up in such a way.
All right. Anything else, Stephen?
No, that's it for me.
Okay. The final point I just wanted to talk on was Dany's plan for Marine there. So last episode, she launched a bunch of chains and collars into the city. This episode, she's just telling people to infiltrate the city to these secret slave meetings and saying, hey, here's weapons, go attack the masters. I was just kind of curious, is that a good plan for what to do, or is there something better she should be doing for kind of wanting to,
I got to be honest. I'm very critical about this Dany's campaign and about Dany a lot of the times. This struck me as one of the more realistic things that they could have done. If there's discontent, unrest in a city, go in and arm them. They will rise up and take over. One of the things that doesn't entirely make sense, would they go all straight to her side and give her the city? That's doubtful. they would take the city for themselves. That's just what would happen. But, I mean, we're saying she's some godlike figure to them for some reason. Maybe they do that. But this is actually one of the scenes that made a little bit more sense to me. You go in, arm the opposition, and they will do your work for you.
I agree. All of the strong walls and people felt secured behind the big, powers of Marine. Yeah, if you want to, I don't like the contemporary lens that this easily paints for us. But if you want to destroy a country or a sovereign nation, you do it from the inside. People usually rally. People usually rally and unify if an outside usurpa tries to stop them. But if you want to destroy and destabilize a group, you do it on the inside and have them turn against themselves.
All right.
Just to add a little bit scholarly, it's the having an outside effect on a country and causing them to all group together is called the rally round the flag effect.
Yeah.
And that is a very established concept.
All right. Oh, also, fuck Alistair Thorne. I think that needs to be stated again there. Just
I am right.
fuck that guy.
Stay classy.
All right. That good for everyone then for this episode? Thumbs up from Gary. All right.
I think so.
It was good for me. Was it good for you, Tyler?
Just gonna leave that one there. All right. Next recording here, we will be discussing Season 4, Episode 5, which is First of His Name, and Episode 6, The Laws of Gods and Men. All right. That'll do us for this episode here. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Have a good night, everybody. Don't listen to
Thanks.
Nick.